Recently, I had to do a radiator replacement for a 2009 Nissan Versa with a 1.6 liter engine. I went on YouTube and I couldn't find a Nissan Versa radiator replacement video for the 1.6. A lot of the 1.8s, but no 1.6. After I finished replacing the radiator, then I had the thought, gee, maybe I should put together a video to help other people out in getting this task done. Just an FYI, I'm a do-it-yourselfer. I'm not a mechanic. Uh, the actual job that I did took actually less than an hour. And in all honesty, I did not have to actually remove anything except for the radiator itself and the hoses that I replaced, and some other stuff, as far as taking out. But you really don't have to remove a lot of things, and I think that's one of the biggest mistakes is everybody takes everything out, and then you have to put everything back in, and that just kind of wastes time. So let me kind of walk you through what I did, and hopefully it not only save you time but also save you money. So here's the 2009 Nissan Versa with the 1.6 liter engine. Uh, that's actually the radiator. That's actually the old one. Uh, the new one was in better condition. As you can see, this one was in pretty bad shape. Had a leak. Started off on the seams, basically where the plastic meets the metal on the tank. I was able to fix that with some radiator stop leak. Then I would say a month to 2 months later, it actually sprung another leak right there on the top of the tank. And that one was a little bigger. You can see where the duct tape is at. Had to do some patchwork there and decided, gee, I better replace this radiator. Uh, with that last repair, I was able to get probably about a week. Like I mentioned before, it's a 2009 Nissan Versa 1.6 liter engine. It's an older car. We got 175,000 miles on it. This is the first radiator replacement that we've done on it. Really haven't done anything to it, in all honesty. Things been, as long as you maintain them, these things last forever. But it's getting there. It's getting up in age, and the things are falling apart, and things are need to be replaced. And so, I want to keep the car for another. We want to get it up to at least 250 before we even think about getting rid of it. So you see the repairs that I did on the that last one right there was a crack right along the top of the tank, and I was able to again use some stop leak. Stop leaks works really well, and people. I'll tell you the main thing about using stop leak is don't try to stuff the whole bottle in there at once. What you want to do is you want to basically put a little at a time, and it'll basically find the leak, and it'll stop it. And then you add a little more, add a little more, and at one point it actually will actually fix the leak if it's on the seams or if it's a small pinhole someplace, which is really cool because, like I said, I ran the car probably about 2 to 3 months, just using radiator stop leak until that big crack on the top tank took place, and that was a little bigger crack along the top, and that took a little more doing. I was able to use some stop leak and also use some PCV pipe glue that you would use to basically put pipes together, PCV pipes together, and I put some duct tape on there, and it really gave it a good seal. I just needed to last probably about 7 days until my next day off. Whenever you do these things, just make sure you carry a lot of water and that you're conscious that there is a leak, and you're constantly checking whenever you get inside your car to drive any place. You're going to definitely want to make sure you have water and to make sure it's always full. And take in mind, my car is a commuter car. I drive 35 miles one way to get to work, and so that's a 70 plus mile round trip on a daily basis. And I was able to get with radiator stop leak approximately, like I said, good 2.5 months with the leak on the seams, and then that big leak on the tank came up. It's cracked right across the top, and using some stop leak, was able to get another week out of it. I could probably have gone more, but I wasn't going to chance it. Getting kind of tired of constantly putting water in there. So overall, the replacement was pretty simple. Saved a lot of money. I think the going rate for replacing a radiator in a shop is upwards of $700, including the radiator and all the other things that you might have to buy, like hose clamps and hoses and um, coolant and that kind of thing. That's $700 at a shop. If you had a backyard mechanic, it's probably going to do it for about 400. And if you do it yourself, I think total I spent just under $200. That's including the radiator, the coolant, and things like zip ties and new hose clamps and that kind of thing. So it was basically, if you do it yourself, you're going to save yourself a lot of money. Uh, on the slideshow right now, it's showing the tools that I use. We didn't use too many tools. Matter of fact, half these tools that you're going to see, we didn't use at all. In all honesty, the only thing that you needed was a metric 12 socket and a metric 10 socket, and that's it. Really, all these other tools were just kind of ancillary and to help out on some things. But I could have actually got away with just using the 10 and the 12 socket, because basically it was just a handful of bolts that had to be taken out, and the job was complete. Uh, some of the other things you might want to have handy, and we'll kind of discuss it a little later. That universal joint for the 3/8 socket came in really handy when we had to get these bolts that were kind of far away, and you're going to want an extension. You're going to need it that long. I think one is a foot and a half, and one's another foot, or something like that. You just got to have some long ones, and you'll see why in a second. And again, have your water handy and your coolant. Make sure you replace the coolant. And I say change the hoses. I had bought some zip ties because you get those basically those fasteners that all these new cars have, and instead of just replacing those fasteners, because those are rather expensive, as a do-it-yourself, I just use zip ties, and it's a lot cheaper, and it fastens just as well. I also had my jacks. So what I did was I jacked up the front end of the car, just made it easier for me to get underneath the vehicle. You're going to want to do that too. When you actually get underneath the vehicle, there's actually the plastic, basically plastic cowling or whatever, the skirt on the bottom. I didn't remove that. All I did was take off the front fasteners, and I was able to bend it downwards, and it gave me access to everything without actually taking off the whole plastic thing. Again, save some time. You don't have to take that off at all. You just have to take off the front ones, and it just kind of drops down. These were kind of nice to have, but I really didn't use them. I got tired of kind of wrenching, and so basically just pulled off the ratchet. The hammer kind of came in handy because there's actually, when you actually seat the radiator into the where the fan assembly, the radiator actually fits into the fan assembly, and just a little tap on the top was to knock it into these little wedge pieces where it's actually secured to on the bottom. But that's it. As you can see, we really didn't use too many tools. Had some wire cutters there, and that was just to cut the zip ties. Again, that's just, but really the only tools that you're going to need is the ratchet, the 12 millimeter, the 10 millimeter, and it'd be nice if you have the universal joint and with the extensions, as long as an extension as you can get. So some of the things that you're going to have to actually remove before you start taking bolts out, the coolant reservoir definitely has to come out. The air intake right there, that all has to come out. And again, it just pops right off. You just kind of, you see it has, I put the zip tie fasteners there, but you just take the fasteners off, and then you just literally just yank up on it. The box to the right, there's is just secured in with a little pin. You don't have to do anything. There's one that you're going to have to do too, is take off the license plate. So if you have a license plate frame in the front, you're actually going to have to take the license plate, because there's actually two bolts that are behind there inside the grill. And that coolant reservoir, that just pops right out. You see the screws there. That screw is actually a fan assembly connected to the radiator, but the actual coolant reservoir is not bolted to anything, and that just kind of, you just yank on it, pull upwards, and the whole thing comes out. You also saw the washer fluid reservoir, or the receptacle where you pour the washer fluid in. You're going to actually pull that out too, because there's actually a bolt behind it that you're going to have to remove to take off the basically to get to the radiator. So that's another important one to take out, and I think it's going to come up again in the picture. So we're just going to wait for that one. Yeah, so take out that license plate. After you take things out, then also take the hoses. This would be a good time to remove the top hose. You can take that out. There you go. That's that washer fluid thing. If you can see, there's actually a bolt right behind it. You're going to have to take that off. So that's kind of important. So after you remove all those different things, such as the air intake, the coolant reservoir, and the washer fluid reservoir, basically the only thing you're going to do now is remove some bolts, which is crazy. Now, these two pins right here, this one and this one, that's what's actually holding the radiator in place. So this whole piece right here, once it is removed, you can actually flip it upwards, and then you can actually get access to the radiator, which is really, really neat. So the only bolts that are actually on this thing is this one. There's one on the other side, and there's one on the side, and there's one on the other side where the basically the washer fluid receptacle is at, that you take out. You take off those 4 bolts, and literally this whole thing kind of pops up. But there are 2 other bolts that you have to take out before that. And on the bottom of here, which is basically where you your hood latch is at, on the bottom of it, behind the license plate, inside the grill, there's 2 bolts that you need to remove. And once you remove that, this whole thing kind of flops forward, which is really kind of cool, because like I said, you're not really taking anything apart. The other thing that you need to do is understand the condenser is in the front, and then you have the radiator sandwiched in between the condenser and the fan assembly. So one of the things that I did that made things easy is that once you flip this over, you take the condenser, well actually you kind of push the radiator towards the back of the engine, and then what you do is you take this and you flip it over, and then you take the condenser, and I actually took it off, the condenser out, and I was able to not remove it, but pull it out and bring it forward, giving me more room, basically opening up the sandwich, the condenser, the radiator, and the fan assembly. And it just gave me a little more access to getting to the actual radiator itself. The next thing you had to do is, after you get these pins out, this folds forward. I actually took the fan assembly, and the fan assembly is just held on, and we'll see it later, these 2 little, basically it fits into these wedge little square things on the bottom, and all you do is you just yank up on the fan assembly, and all of a sudden it frees up the entire radiator, which will just come straight out. So literally, these are the bolts that you took off. And again, you see where that reservoir is at, where you put in your washer fluid. You take that one out. Oh, I didn't mention these. So there are some bolts here and on the other side, which is for the headlights. You're going to take those off. basically just to kind of give yourself some access as far as when you're bending that thing over. So you're going to actually take those off too as well. So not only you got a headlight one on this side, headlight assembly on that side, and you can see where the bolt is hiding behind that receptacle. And you can see where I zip tied. I took off, zip tied my, instead of using the actual push pins that go inside there. They're just cheaper. I'm just being cheap. So there's that bolt. Basically, that's the reservoir for the washer fluid. And all these are, there's a mixture of either a 12 or 10 millimeter. So like I said, that's all you need is a 12 and a 10 millimeter, and all of these bolts are going to come off. There's that bolt right there. So you got to get that one off. You got to get that one off. And then this whole thing just folds forward. And that's how you get to those pins. So take that one off and take that one off. And there's another one down there on the bottom. You do not have to take off these two. Do not take off those two. So this is why you took off the license plate in the front. Inside the grill, or behind the grill, to the left, you can see those two bolts. And those have to be removed. That's the thing that holds the hood latch assembly. So it secures it to the frame. So, and this is the grill part. You actually have to take the extension, and you're going to run the extension through that front grill. And there's the bolts right there. It's kind of a better picture. And there's two of them. They look like 10s. I mean, I could be wrong. They could be 12s. But I think they were 10 millimeter. So that's what I use. Basically a ratchet with an extension, a fairly large extension. And because it's kind of offset, you're going to have to use the universal joint. The universal joint is going to basically correct the offset, so it's basically easier to get to the bolts. And once you take off those two bolts, like I said, that whole assembly on the top just flips over. There's just a couple of pictures to show some of the locations of things. And so that's the upper radiator hose. Yeah, you want to disconnect the old one. You want to keep the old ones. I found that the Gates hoses that I got were cut to fit, so you're going to have to, and that's why I had the razor blade, it's because you're going to have to cut to fit to the originals. They weren't exact fits. This is the basically where the fan assembly actually wedges in there. So this is kind of a sideways picture. There you go, that's better. And so when you actually set the fan assembly back in, you got one on one side and one on the other side. And it actually wedges right inside there. Some of the other things you're going to have to take off. It's funny. I wasn't able to find the pepcock. It had to drain the radiator. It is on the very, very bottom. And it was very difficult to see. I didn't even see it. So the way that I drained it was through the bottom hose. And what I did was I put my little pail underneath it, and I was able to kind of shimmy out the bottom hose a little and let it kind of drip and leak into my pail until it was full, and I was able to kind of take it off. But if I knew where that drain plug was at, that would have been a lot easier, I think. But it turned out okay. I was able to get it off by going there. You also have an oil cooler line and a transmission line on that side, and so those hoses need to be removed before you take out the radiator as well. Those are accessed through the bottom. Like I said, that bottom panel, plastic panel, you don't have to remove it. just basically fold it down and you can get to it. And these things are going to come important again later when you go to reset or put the uh, fan assembly back onto the. So like I said, basically the radiator is sandwiched in between the condenser and the fan assembly. So if you can take, like I said, after you fold this over, you can take the condenser up and push it basically forward and basically pull the fan assembly out and push it backwards, and you're able to pull the radiator straight out without really removing anything. When you basically put it back in or put everything back together, you're just going to kind of go in a reverse order. Obviously, you're going to set the condenser back into its place. Then you're going to take the radiator and put it where it goes. What I did was actually I did that, and I put the pins together, folded it over, and then these pins, make sure they fold back in. And then I was able to take the fan unit, the fan assembly, and put it into those two little pegs, push it down, and then you're going to screw them on. I didn't have this one, but you're going to have, that's basically where you screw back the fan assembly. And that's it. Make sure you put all the screws back on. Um, you know you did a good job if you don't have any leftover parts. so make sure that you put all the screws back to where they go. And again, I think total time was less than 1 hour to basically take out the old radiator and put the new one in. Like I said, I'm not a mechanic. I'm just a do-it-yourselfer, and with some knowledge of how to do things and little research. There was no research on this one at all. They had a lot of videos on the 1.8, but none on the 1.6. There are some slight variants as far as the process is probably the same, but there are, as far as locations of things, might be a little different. I didn't actually watch any of those, um, so I decided again to do one myself. But that's about it. So this is where the fan assembly actually connects, and there's one on the other side. So you have to make sure that you did it. I saved my hoses. The hoses were, I mean, they're old, but they're nice to have inside the trunk just in case you spring a leak. That was a big deal. Again, having the extension and the universal joint with the socket and the ratchet really saved some time. I didn't have to remove a lot of things. I can see if I had to remove the front bumper or the front grill to get to that, that would have been pretty time consuming. It would have taken me, probably just as long to take off the grill and everything to get to those two screws than the entire total time that it took to actually replace the radiator. There's just a couple other things, just reminders. Again, that's these things right here, basically where the fan assembly fits on top of. You're going to be conscious of that when you're reassembling. Don't forget to re-put on your hoses, your oil cooler line, and your transmission line. There's the drain plug. This looking at the radiator upside down. Um, and that's the bottom two. There's actually these little pins that basically fit into the frame, which secures the radiator. And again, that's looking from the bottom two again. So that's it. Basically, radiator replacement or removal and install for the 2009 Nissan Versa with a 1.6 liter engine. Took, again, a do-it-yourselfer myself, not a professional mechanic. Took me basically about 45 minutes to an hour to do it, and I like I said, I saved time by not removing things, by keeping as many things in its place, and using I would say some proper equipment, making sure that you jack up your car. That made things a lot easier as far as access to getting to different places, having things available. The tools, the only tools I swear that I used was the ratchets with the 10 millimeter and the 12 millimeter. Those other things were helpful to have, but if I didn't have them, I probably could have got away without it. The pliers came in handy. That's basically how I took off the hoses. I had the original clamps on there. I would say to replace as much as you can. Replace the hose clamps. You don't know if the old ones are going to fail, so that's always a nice to have. Those are the screw-on type, but just replace them. I mean, they're only a couple of dollars, and the last thing you want is for those to fail, and then all of a sudden you lose your engine. Um, Replace the hoses. I mean, you're already there. So if you're going to replace the radiator, replace the hoses. I kept those just in case as extras, just in case it's spring a leak down the line or someplace down the line. I got an extra one I could just slap them on. Again, had to have the razor blade because those hoses were cut to fit. Needed to do that. And that hammer came in a little handy when you had to tap down on the top of the, basically to knock the fan assembly onto the radiator into those little two pins on the bottom. Other than that, saved myself a good chunk of change. Like I said, going to a shop right now to have your radiator done. Uh, Parts included about $700. Backyard mechanic will probably do it for about $400. But if you do it yourself, I did this for under $200, and that's replacing all the hoses, getting new hose clamps, and the radiator itself, and buying the coolant. So saved myself a lot of money doing it yourself. It's not a difficult task to do. Um, I just showed you. It's just a handful of bolts. Sorry I didn't put a video together, but that would just be kind of boring, and I think everybody would get the gist of it just by looking at it. I think the main thing for myself was just knowing what bolts to take off, and that was I just figured that out just by looking at it. It's just those not even a half a dozen bolts along the top, um, and then the two on the bottom, and literally this whole thing comes off. So save some time, save some money. Hope this slideshow helps you out. Uh, if you're going to attempt to replace your radiator in your 2009 and up 1.6 liter Nissan Versa. So thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you later.